Hey guys, so I don't have any big updates or any real good how-to videos. I've been working a little bit on some water lines for our horse troughs and our water coming into the barn here. So I'm going to show you what we did. Maybe this will help with some ideas you guys have at your barns or other projects you're working on. Just a little bit of plumbing stuff I've been working on. But let's get started here. I'll show you. We're going to start out here. We ended up putting horse troughs outside of the stalls. We've got one in each stall, and we put them on the outer stall so that it's not making a wet mess inside. You can see here we went with a bigger tank. We don't have any kind of float or anything. We're not keeping pressure in the lines. There's a couple reasons behind that I'll get into here in a second, but this is the outside here. We got our water running along the top of the barn. Comes out into a galvanized pipe to keep it nice and sturdy. And then we put a hose on the end so we can change this out if the horses play with it or gets old. And we can also wet down the stalls if we need to. So that's what we have on the outside, and now we'll take you guys onto the inside. All right, so moving on to the inside, we went from galvanized. We have a shark bite connection up there, and then put some PEX line in. We did PEX so that we can keep it continuous without additional fittings, and if it does freeze, then the PEX will expand a little bit. So we've got the PEX running here. All the lines come in from all the different stalls. Runs along this top truss, which you can see raises in elevation and then drops back down over here to our valves. Now, we did the valves on this side of the barn because our water that we ran before we built our barn, we had an idea of where our barn was going to be, and it actually happened to be right next to one of these poles, which worked out good. You see I got a little bit of a mess here because I made some changes, but this is why our valves are over here, and this is what we built to control and fill all the horses' water. There's 5 stalls, so we've got 5 valves. And is what we do there is we connect this hose to the spigot here. And then when we turn that on, we can turn on each one separately depending on how full it needs to get. Show you a little bit more detail here. Back here we came through the wood, put on another shark bite, and run the PEX right into that. So now we've got a continuous line for each stall going up and over to the other side. Now you might be wondering, why didn't you just run everything underground? If there's a possibility it could freeze, why wouldn't you keep it underground and just stub it up next to each trough? That's a good question, and would be a good idea if we knew exactly where we were gonna have all that when we did all this, but we weren't sure, and we wanted the flexibility to be able to move things around. If we wanted to open up 2 stalls, only need 1 water, maybe convert or tee off of the water and run somewhere else. That's why we didn't run everything underground. 2, and this gets into the reason we did not put floats on the tanks. So there's a couple reasons. One of my horses likes to play in the water and has broken every float I've ever put on my tanks. And I just prefer to fill it and watch it myself. It's not that big a deal for me. I enjoy being out here with my animals, and I don't need the water to be constantly full. So, and then the second is I did not want constant pressure in the lines. I didn't want to have to wait for a float. The float fills up a lot slower, and I wanted the water to be able to drain out once we turned off the valve so that it does not freeze in the winter. And again, that's why we have this hose over here connected to our valves. So we use this hose. It's got a quick connect. All of our hoses out here have a quick connect, and we typically have a quick connect on the end of the spigot here. So we can connect it, turn all that on, fill them up, and then when we're done, especially in the winter, we'll disconnect the quick connect, open all the valves, and that allows the water from this point to drain out both ends and leave the pipes fairly empty so they don't freeze and we don't get any cracked pipes or have any issues in the wintertime. Now on to a couple other items that we've been working on. You saw my mess down here from my spigot. I changed out my spigot. When we originally put in this water line, we had a frost-free spigot. If you don't know what that is, it is this right here. So there is the frost-free spigot that I took out. And the point of this, and the reason it's so tall, is that it's supposed to go in the ground about 2-3 feet, depending on your frost line. And then when you shut it off up here, there is a little hole here where the water from this pipe drains out so that there's no water in the top of this pipe when it gets below freezing, and then it won't crack or break the pipe. So we have a bunch of these around the property, but this one being in the barn was not working out well. We had put in an additional line here, this PVC coming off of the line coming in for the hose, and ran it up again across the beams here and over to our pig waters. Our pigs are only here in summer, so it wasn't such a big deal. I didn't think about PEX when I did this, but I thought, well, PVC is easy enough to replace. When I shut it off, it's all above head. If I open up this end here, I have a little plug, as you can see. That will release all the water out of this line, and then during the winter I won't have to worry about it, or I can even blow out the water if there's additional water in the line. And I have an extra valve here to shut it off in the winter. So anyway, I added that, and I had the frost-free spigot here, but because I was so close, every time we were turning it on and off, that water was draining out and just filling the ground. And you can tell how wet everything is right now. You can see my muddy mess here, and it was just making everything really wet. And because it's in the barn now, it wasn't drying up, and the water was rising to the top of a valve box I had here. So it just wasn't a good situation. So we went ahead and changed that out today as well. I put in this galvanized pipe coming up out of the ground about 24 inches with a valve on it, so that in the winter I can insulate this box, I can shut that off and cover it. And then when I need to fill the horse's water, again, I have a quick disconnect here. I can open this, plug in the hose, turn it on, and then turn it off, disconnect, and close it up so it doesn't freeze. This year it was added because just convenience. I have that quick disconnect, so I added this extra pipe so that we can close it off during the summer and just be able to get at it without opening and closing this. I'm not loving this right now, so I'm probably going to change it, support it a little better, and then stick it out a little further so it's not running water here when somebody turns it on. We're eventually going to have a drain here that runs down to, we have an in-floor drain that runs all the way outside of the barn. That's so we can clean out the pig stalls. But eventually I'll have a drain here so we can clean up buckets and other things, and it will run down and out of the barn. And then we won't have muddy messes inside the barn. So again, that's pretty much it. That's all we've really been up to, is just little projects around getting things fixed that we wanted to change, and finishing up some stuff that was needed for the horses now since they're in the barn. If you have any questions or want to see something else specific, let me know. If this was helpful, go ahead and give it a like. If you want to see more, give us a follow. I'd love to hear from you guys and see what projects you're working on. So please comment, leave some comments below, and let me know what you thought. The horses wanted to say hi to you guys. That's Dolly back there. She's our big girl. This right here is Lulu. This is my son's horse. And then we've got Chance, my daughter's horse, one of the sweetest ones we've got. And we've got Gracie over here. She's our young 3-year-old, still learning, but very eager and turning out to be a pretty good horse. So give you a quick breakdown here real quick. I'm building the valves out of galvanized steel, and I put some pipe thread and then putty on the threads just to ensure there was no leaks. I don't think you have to use both, but I always have, just to make sure. And you'll see here in a second the finished product once I was done putting it all together. Alright, so here's what I've built. You watched the sped up version, but is our valves for our horse trough waters, all out of galvanized with some brass valves. Gonna come off the back side into our PEX line there. But I did this out of galvanized because I wanted it to be kind of like an art piece here in the barn. So it's hard to see, it's getting dark. I got to do all this after work today. I was super busy, but there's the wood. I'm going to stick it in there. And that'll be what it looks like. We'll stick a hose on the bottom here, put a few clamps on here to hold it, and then we're going to put wood around all the piping so you don't see it. It just looks like a giant beam. But Kind of a nice little art piece there. And that'll be the finished product.